All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today, we're going to be addressing a very interesting topic that you may or may not have ever thought about before, but we're titling this the number one thing holding you back in your running, because this is one of those tricky things that affects all of us. And depending on who you are and how much you like to dig deep into your thoughts and kind of see what's going on mentally, you may or may not be aware of what is happening. So today we want to show you one of the biggest things that's holding you back in your running so that you can start to notice it more in your life, in your running, in your goal setting, so that you can achieve your goals. And this is one of those things that applies to our running and also to every other area of our life. Because a lot of times when we're coaching runners and we're talking to people, we see a lot of people not achieving their goals. And when they're not achieving their goals, they think that something must be wrong with me. We think that something's wrong with us. Maybe I'm just not capable of achieving this goal that I want, or I'm feeling lazy or unmotivated or incapable again, so we think that there's something wrong with us. But in reality, if we feel that way, you're probably thinking, or you're probably not realizing how much of an influence your subconscious thoughts and beliefs have over your actions.
Right. And I mean, that's really where this whole episode is going, is the number one thing holding you back is stuck up in your head. Like if you had talked to me years and years ago when I first got into running, I was pretty confident the one thing holding me back was just putting more miles on my legs.
Right.
You talked to me about 5 years in, I'm like, well, the one thing holding me back is that I'm not pushing hard enough in certain workouts. And then it's like, oh, well, the thing holding me back is the balance between going fast and going moderate and making sure I'm recovering enough. Like it kept being these physical things, but that's not at all the one thing, the one thing that's holding you back. It all comes under the same umbrella.
Right. Or we like to blame lifestyle things, right?
Yeah,
like
good one.
we blame our schedule. Like the one thing holding me back is my schedule. Like I'm so
Time
busy.
restrictions.
Time restrictions. I'm so busy that I don't have enough time to train. Or the one thing holding me back is my kids. Like I've got so many things going on with my kids. I know I've done it before. I know that I've blamed my kids for things. It's not their fault.
No, definitely not.
It's not our kids' fault. It's our fault. Like, and we just don't want to take responsibility a lot of times for what we are or aren't doing. And a lot of times it's because we don't realize it. And I think that's the really important thing that we want to point out today. It's nothing that you're quote unquote doing wrong. And it's just something that you might not realize is affecting you. And so our goal of this episode is really to start to shine a light on that area so that you can start to notice when your ego is getting in your way, because your ego is the number one thing holding you back from all the goals that you want to achieve. And the reason that you're not achieving those goals is because of your ego. Now, what do we mean by your ego? Let's just do like a quick intro before we get into this, because you might be thinking to yourself, I don't have an ego, right? Like I don't have an ego. Like I'm a very humble person. And so ego, the way that we're going to speak of it today, is not this idea of being egotistical, right? So what is the ego? When you look it up in the dictionary, the ego is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And so a lot of times people are like, well, I don't have an ego, which is the same thing as, it's not, because we all have an ego. Every single person on the planet has an ego. But when we think that, like, the word ego has been associated with the word egotistical.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't have an inflated ego. I think that's what people are trying to say, because it has a negative connotation that way.
What they are trying to say is that they're not egotistical, because the word egotistical, when you look that up in the dictionary, that means excessively conceited or absorbed in oneself. Another synonym would be arrogant, right? And so we don't like to think, oh, that you're arrogant. I'm not arrogant. That is I think when people say I don't have an ego, it means I'm not arrogant.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going for. But everybody has a sense of self. Everybody has a sense of their own self-esteem and self-importance. Like you have that. You have hands and feet. You have an ego. It's all part of the package.
Right. But the way that we want to look at ego today in this episode, yes, it is our sense of self-importance, but it's also the psychology definition of ego, which is the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious. And our ego is what's responsible for reality testing and that sense of personal identity. So who you think you are is part of your ego. Okay. Your sense of identity, your sense of reality of the world around you, of what the world is and how the world works, all of that is part of your ego. So that's really what we're talking about today. So if you first heard the word ego and you're like, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I don't have an ego, like, I want you to try to get rid of that idea, because we all do have an ego. And I want you to try to kind of clean the slate. It doesn't mean you're egotistical. It doesn't mean you're arrogant. It doesn't mean you're self-important. Okay. It means that you have an ego because you have a sense of identity. You have a sense of the way that the world works and what you think, how you think reality is or is not. Right. And our mind is what dictates that. Our beliefs and our thoughts, like, because we start having thoughts and those thoughts turn into beliefs. And then when our thoughts transfer from a thought to a belief, we stop questioning it. We stop thinking about it because it just becomes ingrained in our sense of self. It becomes ingrained in who we are. Oh, this is who I am. And this is what I believe.
Yeah. That whole ego as something related into psychology, which is much more your route. Like, I get the concept behind it. I've learned it, but it was decades ago that I learned this.
Yeah, in your self-paced psychology class, freshman year of college?
No, that was senior year of college.
Oh, it was senior year?
Yeah, no, I think I actually learned more psychology in my senior year of high school when I was like really into, my psych teacher was amazing senior year. And then, but then on this whole idea of like my personal identity, my sense of self, amusingly, when I tried to write about like going way back to Freud's id, ego, and superego, I was accused of plagiarism my freshman year of college.
Really?
Because I knew the concept, so I put it into like an English paper, and the teacher was like, "We didn't discuss this in class. Clearly, I don't know. I didn't Google it. It was."
So what happened?
I had to go have like a meeting with the professor.
You had to go to like academic council?
No, I had to like go to his office. It was like one-on-one. He was like, "I don't think that you wrote this. I think you found this somewhere." And so he made me just sit there and just explain it. Like, he was holding my paper and he made me explain what I was talking about in my paper to him.
And so you could do it.
Yeah, because I knew what I was talking about. Yeah, he still gave me a B+. I was so mad.
Because he didn't want to lose face. His sense of ego was threatened.
Yes, clearly.
Clearly I was wrong about this. But that's the thing. So, all right. So how is our ego holding us back? Okay. So there's two ways that we want to look at this today, because you guys know that we like to look at things from different angles. So the first way that we're going to look at this is the way that our ego holds us back. And then the second way that we're going to look at it is the way that we can satisfy our ego. So that is going to be more into that idea of being more egotistical and self-important. So we're going to look at this in both ways.
Which does show up in most of us, all of us, probably
100% in varying degrees.
That's
right.
It's just a matter of how much.
Exactly. And so we might not want to admit to it, but it does affect us. And I think that, again, the point of this episode is to bring that awareness so that you guys start to notice these patterns. You start to notice when these things are happening so that you can catch them and change them if you want to.
If you want to.
If you want to, right? Always if you want to, because you always have the choice in this. Okay. So how does our ego hold us back? So oftentimes what we see are people feeling disappointed because they're not achieving their goals, right? And if you're feeling that way, a lot of times what we often see in people is that they're not doing the things that they want to do or the things that they need to do to achieve their goals. And a lot of times they say, oh, well, I'm just lazy, or I'm just, I'm not motivated. That's a lot of what comes out, is like laziness and lack of motivation. And really, it's our ego that is trying to protect us, because our ego is there to help protect our sense of self and our identity. So if you have an identity and a sense of self saying that you're not an athlete, like, I'm not an athlete, I'm not really a runner, I'm not a real runner, right? I run, I jog, right? It's this sense of self. And so all of a sudden, if you want to run a half marathon, and in your mind, running a half marathon would be what a real runner would do.
Yep.
Your ego is like, wait a second, we're not real runner. I'm not a real runner. I can't do that.
We've been saying for years, we're not real runners. Real runners run a half marathon. So your whole idea that you're going to seems ludicrous because it doesn't fit your identity.
Exactly.
And your your ego is there to maintain your identity. Like, that's really what it wants to do, is it doesn't want to change itself. It just wants to be as stable as possible because it provides this sense of security.
Exactly. And so throughout our lives, from the time that we are smaller than we remember, that we're, able to actually remember memory, like make memories and whatnot, we've been developing our sense of self. We've been developing our ego. And so we develop these thoughts and beliefs about who we are and what we are capable of based on the things that we learn, what we see in our family and our friends, like what we're exposed to, the trauma that we've experienced in our life, because we've all experienced some form of trauma. But a lot of this might be conscious at the time that we're experiencing it, but then becomes very unconscious and kind of just is this undercurrent of how we operate in the world.
Yeah. And it puts these limits on us because we're like, we've created this little box that we're supposed to exist inside of, and anything that would stretch the size of our box without us even realizing, like it's a glass wall in front of us that we're like, oh, well, I don't really want to go outside of that, and I'm not even sure why, but it feels better over here because you can't even see that there's a wall.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. Like you don't even know you want to go on the other side of it because you don't even know there's a wall there.
Right.
Because it's glass.
Yeah. But for some reason, it's better to just stay here. I should not go over there. And in fact, you've created a wall in between these things. Your ego has put up a wall that says it's safer over here. To go way back to caveman, it's safer in the cave. You go outside, you get eaten by the big scary animals.
Right. And a lot of this is unconscious. And so going back to what I mentioned before, this is not your fault, right? This is not because you're not good enough. It's not because you are lazy. It's not because you're lacking motivation. It's because you have unconscious thoughts and beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of that you might not even be aware of. And so people are saying, okay, well, what is my ego? How do I find it? How do I change these things? And this is the thing about ego. It's a tricky little sucker.
Yeah.
Right. It likes to disguise itself a lot. And so there are lots of different ways that our ego tends to disguise itself. And we're going to go over a couple here.
It could be so convenient if it was just like, I feel my ego is making its presence known, but that's not the sensation that you get inside. Right. You don't get this sensation of, well, my ego is stepping up and holding me back from doing this thing.
Well, and you don't even realize that this is how we're making decisions, right? Because we don't consciously think to ourselves, well, I'm not a real runner, therefore I can't run a half marathon.
That is not the internal dialogue.
That's not usually.
Just say, I can't run it.
Or
we leap to that.
Or I wish I could, but I'm too lazy.
Oh, I wish I could. That's a good one too.
I wish I could. Right. And so how does our ego disguise ourselves? So one of the biggest ways that our ego disguises itself is fear. And there's a lot of types of fear. And I'm just going to mention a couple here, and I'm sure that you can come up with more because this is definitely not an all-inclusive list. But fear of judgment is one of the biggest ones that I see, right? Because we may or may not even be conscious that we are afraid of this judgment, but what will people think? If I put this goal out there, or if I do this thing, what will people think? And sometimes that is a conscious thought, right? Sometimes we think to ourselves, I would really love to do this, but I'm not sure what other people would think of it, right? Starting a business. Okay. Like when I decided to start our business, it's like, I'm leaving physical therapy. I've spent all of these years, all of this time and money and things being a physical therapist. But now I want to start a business. What would people think? People are going to think I'm stupid. People are going to think I'm dumb. Why would I leave such a stable, excellent profession? And it was, and I was happy doing physical therapy, right? I just wanted more. Like to me, there was just this internal sense of, I want to do more. I want to help more people. I want to be able to reach and have a greater impact and help more people in the world, right? But what will people think of me?
Yeah, I think that one's often kind of a conscious question that we ask is, what will people think? It's just that most people don't label it as the ego showing up, but it really is.
Yeah.
That's the ego of what will people think if you leave the box that you've safely put yourself in. People, including yourself, have put you in this box. So if you try and do something outside of the box, one, you're judging yourself. And because you judge yourself, you assume everybody around you is judging you too.
Yeah, but I want to kind of debate what you just said. You said people put you in a box.
No, you put yourself inside the box.
Yeah, you said both, right? You said people put you in this box and one of those people is yourself. But I think that we are the only ones that put ourselves in boxes. Like other people have ideas about us,
Sure.
right? And so in their heads, they might have us in a certain box, right? But we're the only ones that can actually accept that box and put ourselves into that box of
Yeah.
what they think.
I mean, I see this with so many kids in my classroom is I see them within the construct of classroom environment.
Yeah.
So I love to talk to the kids, be like, what do you do outside of this? Because I know them in terms of their math capabilities. And maybe the kid is not phenomenal at math, but they might be like a superstar at something else. So being able to look at them in a different perspective from a different angle is huge, because I don't want to confine them and be like, well, this kid doesn't try very hard. They're not very successful. They seem kind of lazy in this. Maybe this is not their thing. So let's look at it from another angle and be like, look, you can work really hard. You can be really successful. Let's apply those skills over here. It's funny when I see kids and I'm like, they're super quiet. They don't do anything. They seem very unmotivated. And then, their sport shows up in the spring, and I've known them for like 6 months already. And it's like, oh, they're captain of the sport in the spring, and they won't stop talking, and they lead the entire team. It's weird.
Yeah. So again, there's that judgment, right? Of like what other people might think of us that I think does hold us back. And I know that one way this definitely held me back was this idea of running with my shirt off, right? Because I've always been very conscious. I shouldn't say I've always been. See, look, there's my ego again, right? Of like, this is how I am, or this is how I've been. Growing up, I was very self-conscious about my own body, especially my stomach. Like it was always, that's kind of one of the areas that I've just like been very self-conscious about. I wanted to cover it up. And so when it's obviously very hot in South Florida, especially in the summertime, and this was 5 years ago now, but my friend was like, we were running together. We were doing a speed workout. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so hot. This shirt, blah, blah, blah. My friend's like, just take it off. And I'm like, take off my shirt? Like, no, thank you. But no, because what would other people think about my body? It's that was the fear. It wasn't like what I think, because I already knew that I was self-conscious about it, right?
I already know my own thoughts on this.
Right. But it was also like, what would other people think? Like, oh, people see me as in shape or fit or a runner, but if they see my stomach, maybe,
oh my goodness,
maybe their thought about me would change.
It's funny. You have this whole idea of running without a shirt on.
Yeah.
I have shorts that I only wear for speed days. And one, they're nice shorts. So I like to wear them because I can move well in them. But I'm like, should I wear those shorts if I'm just going at like a comfortable, easy pace? People are going to be like, whoa, that's an awkward look. But for some reason, if I go fast enough,
then it's okay.
Yeah, then I can wear the shorts with that inseam.
Well, I remember you telling me about the team. When was this? When you were in high school? I think it was like before you were there, when the boys team was wearing like the pink and flowery shorts.
No, that was like in the 80s. That was like a decade before I got into high school.
Okay.
Yeah, they were getting well made fun of by the other teams around them. It was an all boys high school. And so they were getting mocked by the other teams around them. And they're like, okay, coach, we need new uniform shorts. And we would like them to be extremely short and pink flowers. And coach is like, what are you talking about? He goes, everybody's giving us a real hard time. So we'd like to beat everybody, and we'd like to be wearing these pink shorts while we do it.
Right. So in your head, it's like you can only wear those types of shorts if you're really
to a certain level,
if you're really fast, and you can just prove to everyone that you're better than them.
And I used to wear, I was one of the kids in high school that wore the short shorts. I was like the stereotypical cross country high school kid.
Yeah.
Like, how short can my shorts be? And I'm never going to wear a shirt. Like, that was me in high school. I got to college and I was trying to hang on to the back of the team. And so, I mean, I wore what I wore, but then I came out of it and I had this new identity, essentially, that I was like, I was not that fast.
Yeah, you were the slower one.
I was one of the slower people. So I shouldn't really wear these shorts. I should wear some longer shorts. And then I started coaching, and I used coaching as a justification to be like, well, I shouldn't wear the short shorts at practice. I'll wear a bit longer, a little more conservative at practice. And I think it all just kind of blended into itself.
But how funny is it that could have been your ego trying to protect you?
Totally. And using coaching as justification to be like, well, I shouldn't have the short shorts at practice.
Yeah.
Although I still think that some of my shorts would be awkward at practice.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I don't think that's necessarily ego.
I think there's a combination involved there, perhaps on a couple of pairs.
Yeah, I don't know if the parents, again, what will they think? But so fear of judgment is definitely a big way that our ego tries to disguise itself. Fear of failure is another one. right? What if I don't succeed? So a lot of times I'll see people, and I know that I have fallen into this trap as well, of having a big goal in mind that you might want to go after and setting a smaller one instead.
Yep.
Setting a smaller goal that doesn't challenge me as much, that I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to achieve. That's not going to stretch me that much. It'll stretch me a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll still have to work for that goal.
Uh-huh.
It's not like it'll just get handed to me, but I'm more than 90% sure that I'm going to achieve that thing.
I need to work for it,
Yeah.
but if I do, I'm pretty much going to get the goal, as opposed to the real stretch goal that I could work my tail off for this and still come up short.
Yeah.
Like that's an extreme reach goal, and they're scary. They're frightening because your odds of failure are substantially high.
And then what will that mean about me?
Yeah. Like,
right. If I fail, what will that mean about me?
Then I'm a giant failure.
Right.
So that seems dangerous. That seems like a scary one. I like putting the goals out there that are like, seems so ludicrous, but then giving yourself smaller steps that will be progression steps towards that crazy.
Well, yeah. And that's what we teach inside the academy. You know, we teach a multi-step goal setting process of having that big goal, but then breaking that big goal down into those smaller steps that we know that we are more confident that we can achieve, right? And that will get us closer to that big goal. And is that big goal ultimately, like, we might not achieve it, right? Depending on how big that goal is, but it doesn't mean anything about you and who you are as a person if you don't.
Yeah, but fear of failure shows up all the time in goal setting.
Here's another one that's very interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay. And this is one that people love to debate, and it is the fear of success. And people are like, I'm not afraid of success. Why would I be afraid of success? Like I've had that thought before when I first started hearing about this. And it's not that we are afraid of achieving the goal. It's that we are afraid of change. We are afraid of, how will my life be different if I achieve this thing? Because overall, going back to this sense of ego and our sense of self and identity, our ego likes to be stable. Our ego likes to keep us safe. And so we are just afraid of change in general, even if it's positive change, because we're set in our ways as humans. We know this place. Even if you're not 100% happy or fulfilled or satisfied, you still know it, right? Like there's an old story that I've heard a lot of different times about the dog.
That's where I was going.
We've told this story before on the podcast, so bear with us. But a guy's walking by his neighbor's house, and he sees his neighbor and a dog sitting on the front porch, and the dog is whimpering. And he says to the owner, "Why is the dog whimpering?" And the owner says, "Well, he's sitting on a nail." Then he said, "Well, why doesn't he just get up?" And he said, "Because it doesn't hurt enough yet."
Yeah.
And it's that we will stay in pain. We will stay in discomfort because it's known. And he doesn't realize that he can get up. He doesn't even realize that he can change. And oftentimes I think that we're the same way, conscious or unconscious. It depends, right? It depends, because sometimes we do this very unconsciously. We don't even realize that there are other options for us.
Yeah, I think fear of success is often more unconscious, but I'm sure that other people would completely disagree and be like, no. I recognize fear of failure when it comes up, and sometimes I've undercut my own goals. But fear of success, I think it's sneaky.
It is. It's trickier
because it doesn't make sense when you first hear the idea of like, why would I not want to accomplish my goals? Why would I purposely sabotage myself and not actually go for the success? But the answer is the same reason that you would that you would try to avoid the failure is you don't want to be in an uncomfortable position, and anything different is automatically uncomfortable.
Right. Because all of these different types of fears are all fears of the unknown. We're not sure what people are going to think, right? That fear of judgment. We're not sure if we're going to succeed or not, that fear of failure. We're not sure how our life is going to be different if we do succeed. It's all fear of the unknown. And we as humans, our ego tries to protect us from the unknown, because it's our ego's job to basically keep us safe and keep us alive. Yeah. And anything that we don't know about yet could potentially kill us. Like that is our like lower reptilian brain, like our unevolved side of our brain that tells us like, danger, danger, there's something unknown, you could possibly die.
Yeah. I mean, I think most of us can take that "you can possibly die" and then spin it into new modern world, it's probably not a
Right.
bear. It's probably not a tiger coming at you.
But that's the reaction that we physically have in our bodies, right?
Yes.
Like our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response is activated when we think about stressful situations,
Yep.
even emotionally stressful, not
Yes.
necessarily physically stressful, but throw running into the mix. And it's also a physical stress on the body.
Yes. So like in the actual like race environment, and this is what gets me on like you get major road marathons, like races that people have possibly the Olympics, things that people have been working for years for, not just like, oh, they worked really hard the last 12 weeks in this latest cycle, but could have been working for years and never hit a gold medal, never hit a podium before. And they find themselves with a few miles to go in a podium position, in like a gold medal position.
Right.
You've got to somehow go through all of these different fears and be like, okay, I need to block out all of that fear of failure. What if I miss a water bottle and everything starts falling apart?
Right.
What if I don't miss a water bottle and I hang on and suddenly I'm a gold medalist? Like, what the heck is going to happen there? Because there's so much that could show up. You have to get past all of that because your brain sucks the most energy out of your body. And so if you're already at physical limit and now your brain is working overdrive, you're going to exhaust yourself even faster and you're already trying to do a physically hard thing.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like, and you were talking about people that work for a goal for years and years and years, right? Like I'm reading Des Linden's autobiography right now, which is a fantastic read. It's called Choosing to Run, if any of you are interested. And the story starts back in like I think she ran her first marathon in like 2006 or 2007. And she didn't win Boston until 2018. Right. Like she finished, I think it was
second
2007. No, yeah, she did. But I think it was 2007 or 2008 where she finished second in the Boston Marathon. And she didn't actually win it until 10 years later in 2018. I might be a little off on those years. I can't remember when she finished second.
I thought it was 2011, but I could be off.
I could look. No, because I think it was she was talking about the Beijing Olympics, like, because that's the part of the book I'm actually in right now.
Okay.
But she was talking about training for Beijing with like some of her teammates and things like that. But again, years and years and years of preparation. And she finally won it in 2018. But again, like the way that everything kind of came together that day, which is also a really cool part of the book to kind of read like where she was and mentally and physically, like going into that, you know, it's a lot. And there was a chance that she couldn't have, you know, she might not have won that race. Right. So it's like
there's always a chance of not winning.
Right.
The unknown is enormous.
Right. And so it's like, are we willing to do the work for a very long period of time, even if we might not achieve the goal? All right, let's move on to another way that ego disguises itself. And that is procrastination. I know that this is definitely one of the things I've fallen in the trap of before. And I used to call myself a procrastinator. Like what? Like, well, if I tell myself I'm a procrastinator, of course I'm going to procrastinate.
Yeah.
Right.
That's probably not setting me up for college success.
Right. But a lot of times we procrastinate. We just put it off so that we don't have to make a decision. Right. It's like, I want to run a half marathon, but I delay signing up for the race because I'm not sure I can do it.
Well, I want to check and see if my training is on track. If I get a little bit further along my training.
Am I actually ready? I'm not sure.
And you can always find things in your training to be like, well, I should probably do this test race or see if I can get this, like this 6-week block built in, or until I can hit this exact workout, then I won't do it. And then you hit that one, you'll come up with another workout.
There's always a reason.
There's always something that you can put in your training plan and say, well, until I get to that part, I really shouldn't sign up because I might not be successful.
Right. And so again, that's kind of like getting into another way that ego can disguise itself, which is logic. Like it's logical that I should probably run a 50 mile before I run 100 mile, like going back to you and your training for the Keys 100. Like I want to make sure that I can at least run a 50 mile before I actually sign up for the race.
Yep.
Totally logical, right? I should be able to run at least half the distance. But again, one of those ways that our ego tries to protect us.
Yeah. I just heard a podcast the other day. I was listening to how they made a great question for any ultra marathon listeners. They asked the person, when you're training for a marathon, a lot of people say if you can get to 20, you can get to the finish line. What's the equivalent for racing 100?
Right.
And he suggested it was 100K. If you can
Mhm.
get to 62 miles, then you can make it to the finish line, which sounds ludicrous.
Right.
If you can get to 62, don't worry, the last 38 will take care of themselves.
Right.
But that was his
Yeah.
suggestion.
I mean, because so much of it is mental. Like, yes, of course, there's a huge physical aspect of an ultra marathon, but so much of it is the mental strength that you need just to grit through it and
Yeah.
just keep going. So one last way that we want to talk about before we get into part two of the ways, one last step inside of part one of the way that our ego likes to disguise itself is confusion and overwhelm. I'm not sure what to do, so I just don't do anything. Or I'm not sure what to do, so I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of related to procrastination.
It
on the
is.
first one, I'm not sure what to do, so I don't do anything.
Right.
I'm
just going to put it off.
It's confusion leading to procrastination.
Correct.
It's procrastination through endless logic
Mhm.
of, well, there's so many things, I'm not sure where I would even start,
Right.
so I won't start.
Exactly. But to achieve a goal that you've never accomplished, you have to do things that you've never done. And I'm going to say that again because this is really important. To achieve a goal that you've never accomplished, you have to do things that you've never done. And oftentimes we get stuck. We get stuck in confusion because we're not sure what to do. We're not sure what the next step, quote unquote, should be. So we just don't do anything. And we're here to tell you, again, that is the way that your ego is keeping you safe and your ego is holding you back, because you don't have to be completely clear about the next 10 steps. And I think oftentimes we do that, right? Like,
Yeah,
we're not sure
map.
all 10 steps to get to our goal. So we just stop. It stops us from taking the first one. And oftentimes we just need to take the first one, right? I know I should be strength training, right? I listen to the Real Life Runners podcast. They talk about strength training all the time. Angie is super knowledgeable and a physical therapist, right?
Kevin's
There's my
finally got
ego
on board and waving the flag for strength training.
There's my ego talking, right? No, but I know I should be strength training, but I don't know what exercises to do. So I'm just going to keep running more.
So 10% more miles this week.
Right, exactly. Because YouTube is a rabbit hole, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know where to start there, right? So I'm just going to keep running more, because I also heard that if you want to get better as a runner, you just have to run more. And I like that. That fits into my model better.
That fits my personal narrative. And
Yeah.
it doesn't, it kind of stretches me outside my box, but it keeps me running.
But it's still familiar.
Yes, it's familiar.
It's familiar. Running is familiar. I know miles. I can just do more of them.
So it works with the logic also, because it seems reasonable that running a little bit more will get you a little bit faster. But I think we can avoid this overwhelm by understanding that there's a lot of paths in front of us and picking one of them. So many times we want to take all these steps and line them up and be like, all right, I've got these 10 things that I need to do. So first I do this, then I do that, then I do that. And in all likelihood, it doesn't matter which one you do first. Just pick one of the steps and do that one. And then when you're feeling comfortable with that one, do another step. You just need to start adding things in. You're like, oh, well, I need to do more running and the speed and the strength training and the mobility. Pick one and start doing that thing.
Or find help.
Yeah.
Reach out and find a coach or find a mentor or find a running group, find someone to help you that knows what they're doing. If you're looking to do strength training, maybe you go to the gym and you hire a personal trainer, or maybe you join a strength training group online, or you figure out some way to move forward. But when you start to feel confused or overwhelmed, catch yourself, right? And ask yourself, okay, why am I feeling confused? Why am I feeling overwhelmed? What's the next step that I can take, right? Maybe that next step is I'm going to spend 10 minutes on YouTube. Okay. Maybe that next step is I'm going to look into the Real Life Runners Training Academy, because I know that Angie and Kevin can help me, because we can. Okay. Maybe that next step is I'm going to research gyms in my area and try to find a personal trainer. Maybe that next step is I'm going to ask my family and friends if they've got a personal trainer that they recommend, right? Maybe I'm going to research running groups. There's so many different options. Pick one.
Don't do all six of those things. Pick one and then make a decision.
Well, because then once you do the one, then you can decide yes or no, right? I'm going to look into this option. Is that the way I want to go or not?
Yep.
right? Okay, maybe let me have a couple options. Okay, I'm going to look into all these different ones, but then I'm just going to choose one and move forward.
That's which is the key is ultimately you have
Right.
to get to the action, you have to be done with the research portion,
Mhm.
pick one and do it. Because you can't really guarantee if it's going to give you successful results until you do the thing.
Right.
And then you can go back and be like, all right, I should have taken a different path. And that's going to be okay also.
Yep, exactly. All right. The next part that we want to get into here is, again, the way that our ego holds us back. And this way that we're going to look at ego is that sense of self importance. Okay. It's more of the dictionary definition, doing things to just satisfy our ego, doing things to help ourselves feel good enough.
Yes.
Is I think that a lot of what we try to do that, again, we don't realize that we're doing, like in some way we're feeling like we're not good enough, and that if we just accomplish this thing, then we can prove something to ourselves, or then we can prove something to someone else. And it's doing things that we think we should do
Yep.
that provide that brief satisfaction, or that more shallow sense of satisfaction. And oftentimes we do this because we're feeling a lack of satisfaction when we achieve our goals, or because, or I shouldn't say that. It's the opposite actually. It's doing things that we think we should do, and then when we actually accomplish those things,
Yep.
then we feel that lack of satisfaction even though we've achieved the goal. Like, we've actually achieved the goal, but we're still feeling a little bit empty inside.
Well, because the goal might not have been all that worthwhile. The goal might have
For
only,
you.
yes, the goal might have only provided that very brief, that very shallow satisfaction because it wasn't that big of a thing for you. Like
Mhm.
one of the biggest ways this shows up is goal setting,
Mhm.
where the goal really isn't all that important. It's not a deeply connected goal for you. Could be for somebody else,
Mhm.
but your friend signs up and does this marathon, and you say, "Oh yeah, I'm also going to do it." But they have like a deep emotional connection to it. They're raising money for something. Maybe they've got, I don't know, whatever the life desire is that
Mhm.
said, yes, 26 months seems like a winner. And if you don't have that and you're just like, yeah, well, my friend's doing it, I'll also do it, it's not going to be as satisfying. And so you do this thing, maybe
Mhm.
partway through training, it starts getting a little dragging on you. And ultimately, even if you make it to the race, it's not going to be this deeply satisfying thing because you piggybacked onto somebody else's goal.
Yeah. Same thing with PRs,
Yeah.
right? Like, running a marathon is a great example, or a half marathon, any race distance,
Yep.
right? Signing up for a race because your friends are doing it. If it's important for you to be connected with your friends, and you're going into it with that as the goal of, like, I just want to go and spend some time with my friends, fantastic. But if one of your friends has a goal of setting a PR at that same race, and you don't have that same goal, it's going to be a lot harder for you to do some of the work necessary to achieve that thing. Right.
Yes.
Or even if you do achieve the same time as your friend, it's not going to mean as much to you. You're going to be like, okay, like,
Yep.
yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I did it, but it's not going to give you that same level of satisfaction as your friend that has a very, strong connection to that goal.
I mean, I think chasing PRs is always a tricky thing, and
Yeah.
it's almost entirely done for satisfying your ego. Is there's a number out there. If I get that number, I'll feel better. And that number can always get lower.
Yeah.
Like it really can. And I think it gets even more dangerous if that number starts being prescribed by other people.
Uh-huh.
To get a Boston qualifying time. You didn't come up with that number. Somebody else, there was a committee that came up with the numbers to figure out what it is, what it's going to be to get like a London best of age time.
Yeah.
Like there's all sorts of races and they dictate a time. And so you're like, oh, well, if I get that time, then I will be good enough. But you didn't create that time. So when you hit the thing, how satisfying is it going to be?
Well, it depends on the meaning that you place on achieving that goal.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that one. It's perfect.
Because it's not necessarily the number, it's what that number means.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like, if I hit a BQ and I know that I am quote unquote good enough to run the Boston Marathon, then that's going to put me in the elite 1% of all marathon runners ever, whatever. I'm not
Yep.
sure if that's an accurate statistic, so don't quote me on that one. But it's, what does that number mean
Yep.
to you? And what does that number mean to other people also? I want to run a BQ because then other people will see me as a good runner. Then I will earn the respect of my running group.
I think you've gone to the bad place at that point. I
Right.
want to run a BQ so that I can tell other people that I did it,
Mhm.
because then they will think that I am impressive enough as a runner.
Well,
Impressive enough.
and I don't think it's the bad place. It's just that we have to be aware of it. I
Yeah.
don't think any of this is good or bad. I think it's just understanding the reason that we do things.
Yeah.
And it's understanding our motivation and our connection to those numbers, to our goals. And if it's important for you to fit in with your running group, then do it. Like, I'm not going to judge you for that. It's not my life, it's not my goal, but if that's a really important goal for you to achieve, fantastic. Like, just understand the reason behind it, right? And have that connection to your goal.
Yeah. Understand why you have that PR. Like, did
Yeah.
you just pick a number? Did you pick a number that somebody else created for
Right.
you? And how deeply connected are you to it?
Well, I think that where it becomes more problematic and what you're saying, more of the bad place, again, trying to keep away that judgment of good and bad, but like where it can become more problematic for people is trying to impress others without regard to your own long-term progress and your long-term health. It's like, I just want to achieve this goal so that I can say that I did it,
Mhm.
even if that means I overtrained myself and now have to take 6 months off.
Yeah. I mean, this happens both with trying to chase a race PR,
Mhm.
but it also just happens in training itself. Like, this is the Strava trap, and I don't have Strava. It seems like a
Mhm.
fascinating world to live inside of, but I don't have it because it seems like it could have the negative slippery slope side to it,
It
very
does.
much so,
It does too for a lot of people.
because you want to post what you put out for your run that day.
Mhm.
But if your run was like, I did like a slow, easy recovery jog, do you want to put that out there? And so then they'll put up all of their Strava data, but they'll make sure that they label it. And it was very clear, easy recovery jog.
Mhm.
And then, or
Just so you know, my pace isn't as fast as
Yep.
it's supposed to be or it should be.
Yeah, it was 120 degrees outside
Right.
and the humidity was through the roof. And so that's my justification for running slow. Or they'll avoid that and they'll be like, all right, well, if everything's getting posted to Strava, then it just needs to be one really good workout after the next, after the next. And suddenly you've completely overtrained yourself because you're so worried about what your Strava file is going to say.
Because you're so worried about what other people are going to think or judge you.
About your Strava file.
Right. I mean, I remember when like Molly Seidel, she posted a workout and said something. I forget the exact comments, but her comments were something about how slow her run was that
Yep.
day. And it was because it was like 9 something minute pace
Yep.
per mile. And for her, that is slow. That is an easy recovery run. But she took so much heat off of the internet
Yep.
because people are like, oh, 9-minute mile, that's not slow. I would wish that I could run that. But for Molly Seidel, who runs marathons in under 6-minute pace,
Yep.
a 9-minute mile is a slow mile for her. It's all relative. Again, there's no such thing as fast and slow. I mean, there's things I think that we could all agree that Molly Seidel, Elliot Kipchoge, like they're fast runners, right? Like we can all agree on certain things, but again, it's all relative.
It's completely relative.
Yeah.
And she took a lot of heat off of that because if I remember correctly, she'd like posted a picture of herself probably looking awful and a picture of her watch. She didn't actually post her pace, but she
I don't
took
remember
a picture
her
of
posting a picture of it. I just think it was like a comment that she put in Strava
oh,
about that run.
I mean,
or the way that she named that run.
so maybe I'm thinking of somebody else, but
Yeah,
someone had a
maybe.
picture of their watch after a run and then it was like really struggled through this one. And then, the internet being what it is, someone zoomed in on the picture to figure out exactly how far and fast they
Right.
went of like, oh, like it, like the ultimate humble brag off of this one of, zoom in on the watch and see exactly how fast and far that person went. But you have to realize that we're not all Olympians.
Right.
So their struggle day and our struggle day are going to be completely different images.
But they're going to feel the same. And that's the beautiful thing about running is that regardless of what the number on your watch says, we all know what it's like to struggle.
Yeah.
And that's what we can connect to with other people. It doesn't have to be the exact pace or the same distance that's causing the struggle. It's just a struggle run is a struggle run. And we all know what that feels like.
Right. So some of us are like, well, I'm going to drag myself through this thing. And you get through 3 miles. And some people who are being paid to run for a living are like, I had to drag myself through it. And it was 12 miles.
Right.
And it doesn't compute, but that's their job. Sometimes we have bad days at the office.
I mean, it's like when people with you, when Kevin is someone that eats a lot of food and does not gain weight. And people hear that and they're like, oh, that's such a struggle. Like, I wish I had that problem,
Like,
you
yes,
know?
I would like to put on 5 more pounds so that I can be more equipped to run an ultra marathon.
Exactly. Like, it actually is a struggle for you. Like, that is an important thing to help you achieve your goals. And people, since you don't fit into their box
Yeah.
or of the struggles that they're used to, they don't like to recognize that is a struggle for you.
Yeah.
Like, it was hard for me too, and I'm married to you, you know, like because I am part of the people in the other box, like
Yep.
of like, oh, I, you know, have struggled with my weight in the opposite direction, right? Of like, I've had too much weight that or quote unquote too much weight, right? Like
Sure.
in my mind,
Mhm.
that wasn't easy to lose for me. And you're the same struggle, just in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
It's still a struggle.
It's still a struggle,
Right.
and it's still trying to it's not trying to make my body fit into anybody else's spot. It's trying to make my body be prepared to be as successful as possible.
Perform the way that you want it to.
Yeah, for performance day. And
Right.
that's what it is. So training to try to impress somebody, to completely sacrifice whatever your long-term progress is. I've got this workout and then this workout and this workout. Great. How'd that race go at the end of it? You know, like, or what does that look like 5 years down the road? Because you're probably not still stacking impressive workout after workout after workout because you're broken.
Yeah. And I think that leads nicely like into like the last point that we wanted to make of ways that we do things to kind of satisfy our ego. It's getting caught in other people's races.
Yes, I personally have done this many, many times. And
Yeah.
I think I'm getting better at it, or at least I recognize as I'm doing it. But my first thought, I put this one in here because I vividly remember doing this when I was a freshman in high school and a track meet. I qualified for the freshman, sophomore top 8 invitational because I had one of the top 8 times in the league. I knew I was going to probably get 8th. Actually, the top 16 people made it in, and the top 8 people got medals. I was probably somewhere in the like mid to back teens.
Okay.
Because I was a freshman. But it was also at this track meet that as you were running, they were literally announcing names. So it was the 2 mile, 8 laps of the track. I took the lead 200 meters into it, and I got my name announced over the stadium. And then I promptly faded for the next 7.5 laps.
Oh, that's painful.
And afterwards, my coach is like, "What, Brown? What was that?" I'm like, "Coach, they said my name." And he was just like, "You're an idiot." He put me in a box.
Yeah. But this is like equivalent to when you're going out and running a half marathon or a 5K or a 10K, whatever it is. Say you're out running your local 5K and you've decided, okay, here's my pacing strategy. This is what I'm going to do. And then someone runs by you in a banana suit.
I was exactly going to say, then the banana runs past you. You're like, well,
I can't let the banana beat me.
It
and then,
seems appealing to chase that down.
And then you throw your race plan out the window to try to keep up with the banana.
Did you laugh partway through that because you caught my appealing joke, but you had already started your sentence?
Oh my God, no, I didn't catch it.
Come on. I thought I nailed that one.
Oh, I totally missed it. I'm sorry.
But this happens so often in whatever the race is, whatever the race distance is. Somebody goes past you and you now decide whether they're in a costume or not. You're like, well, I'm just going to stay with that person. Right. And then that person decides to throw in a surge.
Yeah.
Then that person needs a bathroom break and you've lost it. You're like, do I stop and go with it? Like what goes along?
I see men doing this a lot with women too.
Oh,
like,
Lord,
right.
Yeah.
Like I can't let a girl beat me.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of ego that's getting in the way.
Oh, I mean, one of the most tragic things I think to watch is the finish line of the local 5K, of watching the like 30 to 40-year-old men just kick it in with everything they possibly can, and then just like stumble across the line and dry heave over in the grass because they had to beat the 16-year-old girl who's like the high school phenom, but they are not a chance. They're like throwing elbows. The poor girl is out there
pulling on her ponytail.
Like, it's brutal, and I've watched it way too many times.
I know, but that's a lot of people get stuck in that, right? Because they're like, that person's not going to beat me, and instead of it coming from a place of let me keep up with this person, using it as motivation, it's the opposite. And again, you can use this to your advantage.
Yes.
Right. Like there's a way that this is a really good thing for some people. It's just your thought about it. And just again, guys, our goal for this episode was to bring that awareness so that you can start to notice and you can just start to question these things, because when you become more aware of it, now you have more power over your results. You have more power over your running. You have more power over your life. You have power over your goals because you can control the way you're thinking about things. You can decide, okay, do I like the way that I'm thinking about things? Is this a helpful way for me to think about it? Or is it not? Like, is it moving me in the wrong direction or the right direction?
Yeah, I mean that's really what all this is, because you can twist most of these things to be a positive, beneficial. You can make it like a short-term motivation, and it gets you going.
Mhm.
Of I recognize what's going on here. I recognize this is really coming just to satisfy my ego,
Mhm.
but it's going to get me out the door. And once I get out the door, maybe that's going to start a habit. It's going to start the habit wheel where you're going, and that's positive.
Mhm.
Like so many people are like, well, if I get motivated, then I can start doing the action. But the action very often creates the motivation because you've got this sustainable thing that's going.
Yeah, because motivation again is just a feeling
Yep.
and your feelings are created by your thoughts. So if you're doing the action, then your thoughts often become I can do it
Yep.
or I am doing it and then it naturally breeds more motivation, right? Which is why they say that action breeds motivations because when we start to take actions, we start to change the way we think about things.
Yeah.
Because again, it all goes back to our thoughts. It all goes back to our beliefs. It all goes back to our ego, our sense of self, our sense of identity, our sense of who we are and how reality is in the world. So be aware of that ego because it's a tricky little stinker that sometimes gets in your way, but it can also be something that you use to your advantage. And that's what we hope that you start to do after this episode.
Mhm. And
So,
also don't plagiarize in college.
also that. So, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with your friend, share it with a friend, send it in a text message, screenshot it, and share it on social media because the more runners that we can help, the more, the happier the
The
running
world is the whole world.
the running community and the world will be. So, as always, guys, thanks for joining us today. This has been the Real Life Runners podcast, episode number 314. Hey, it's Pi.
Hey, it's Pie Podcast.
314. Now get out there and run your life.